Thanks very much. Well, let's continue to look at the several strands to this story. One, of course, the obvious humanitarian strand, what is actually happening on the waters, specifically, actually, to children. Save the Children flagging that up today, talking about their fears of, on current trends, perhaps even 2,500 children dying at sea if that trend is not checked. Well, let's talk about this with Dr. Unni Krishnan, who's Head of Disaster and Preparedness for the humanitarian organisation Plan International. Thanks very much for being here with us. The numbers, every element of this story is disturbing, but particularly the area around children. So many children are making these really perilous journeys.
Absolutely. We are talking about children who are fleeing from deaths. They are taking desperate measures under desperate circumstances. We are not talking about children who are coming to Europe, to going to Paris or London to see the Buckingham Palace or Eiffel Tower. They are fleeing from death and they need support. And we need to act quickly because time is running out.
I was really surprised when I read that many of the children are actually making this journey unaccompanied.
Absolutely. That makes the things even more complicated because they are detached from their families. Sometimes they lose their parents during that journey through the sea. Sometimes they are going on their own. So we just listened to your correspondent talking about the type of violence which the refugees have been subjected to. So just think about children who are more vulnerable in such circumstances.
And presumably particularly prone and particularly vulnerable to the people trackers. European leaders are talking about how you tackle those, but these children are particularly vulnerable to them.
Absolutely. So they will need assistance in the form of search and rescue, which has been discussed, but they also need immediate humanitarian life-saving assistance in the form of food, water and shelter. And also equally important is protection for them. We just listened about the violence. And also they are going through an unending trauma, so they need psychological care and support. So all what I mentioned now is dealing with the consequences of this crisis. But it's also important that we address the causes and the dynamics. We are talking about millions of people who are being displaced and uprooted from their communities because of poverty and because of violence and war. It's time that we take a grip on this issue and stop knee-jerk reaction. It's time to have coordinated action on this.
But that's an interesting point, but do you think anything can be done to change the dynamic of all the causes of it in terms of it being done quickly to stop all of what we're seeing on the seas continuing over the next few weeks and months?
Yeah, absolutely. The priority is to deal with the people and children who are lost in the sea, search and rescue and saving their lives, and also dealing with the humanitarian needs. But at the same time, it's also important that we start looking at the bigger picture. So while search and rescue should remain the priority, absolutely no question, but it's also time that we start looking at the other dimensions of this, because we can't tackle this issue only by looking at one dimension. But it's important that we place that dimension, which is rescue and saving lives, as the priority today.
Well, Dr. Krishnan, thanks very much for coming in to talk to us. Thank you. And we obviously have in-depth coverage of this whole migrant crisis on our website. Go to bbc.com/migrant crisis. There is full background and a lot of